Good to have you back again. Apologies that I didn't get to finish all of what I wanted to talk about last night on the live stream. It ended up being over 3 hours, and I still hadn't quite got to the end of things. And I didn't want to just try and rush through the last couple of speakers that I needed to talk about. Once again, I want to mention that I didn't actually get to see all of the speakers at the conference anyway, so my apologies to those that I didn't get to see. Gary Hasseltine was one, Jason Porterhouse another. I managed to see most of them, but yeah, was sort of shuttling a bit backwards and forwards to Lizzie's stall and just getting food and drink and those sort of things. So my apologies, these things do happen at conferences, but I know the feedback I got from the people that did go to the other talks that I missed was very good, and they were out of an equally high standard to the ones that I saw. So I just wanted to mention that. But yeah, to get straight back into the ones I did see. So Igor Eekhaut, I hope I pronounced your name right there, Igor. As I mentioned last night, just spoke to him very briefly at the conference itself, just to congratulate him on his talk, and just mention there was some synchronicities I felt in terms of what he was talking about. Just struck some chords as I was listening, and exchanged a few words with him since on Facebook, and he has kindly said that he would come on at some stage to have a chat on the channel. So that's really kind of him, much appreciated. So hopefully we'll try and get that arranged in the near future. Hi Green Tea, thanks for joining us again, and thanks very much for being our first contributor on the Buy Me a Coffee. That's so kind of you, and we really do appreciate that. And for anyone else that feels the need or that can be generous, the links posted in the chat. But thank you. So yeah, I mentioned briefly before sleepiness overtook me last night, the beginning of sort of Igor's presentation, when he was talking about, in a way, like this sort of a first big step on his getting into this sort of research area and looking into different kinds of reality, I suppose, and the codes that govern our reality, and perhaps it would enable us to go through those barriers between different dimensions and that sort of thing. And yeah, he on 28th of July 2010, he was at a conference in Alton Barnes, and I believe it was Andrew Collins who had spoken there. And I think I'm right in saying, I may have got this wrong, that it was a talk about Andrew's discovery of these underground chambers around under the pyramid. So that's a bit of a synchronicity there, and that's particularly come back into the news again. And he was with a colleague, Igor, and he was just walking on that hill, and he saw these plasma balls, and very striking. And he was, but he had some skepticism as well as to what these were. So he said he asked a question, but just mentally, just as a test to see if it would these balls, entities, whatever, would pick things up. And he asked them to, I can't remember exact words, but show some sign of that they were conscious, they were an entity of some kind. And they actually transformed into human-like figures in the sky. And he said the person that he was with at the time, he said, he said, what did you just see there? And it was exactly, he saw the same thing. So it wasn't just what you could call a hallucination or something like that of an individual. And he said that he started building up a correspondence with Andrew Collins, and I think just trying to make sense of what he'd seen. And he'd mentioned to Andrew that he'd had this incredible experience, and then a bit later on Andrew sent him something from a completely different third party. I can't remember if this was an article that appeared on the internet or whether it was something that had been sent to Andrew personally, but it was someone else in that area at the same time, but not with Igor. And they had seen exactly the same thing. They'd seen these humanoid figures in the sky, and they did a drawing of them, and this completely was identical basically to what Igor had seen. So that was another a proof that this was a very real experience and not just someone's personal delusion, shall we say. John Good, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. So yeah, I mean, it just seems like a most incredible experience. But then sort of things started to follow on from that, and he said that he started seeing swans a lot and just various different synchronicities. Maybe it's things with swan in the name or different things like that. Just one of these situations I think a lot of us have had. I know I've had, when just you keep getting, whether you want to call it like a glitch in the matrix, and certain things just keep popping into your perception. And obviously skeptics will just say, well, these are just coincidences, this is nothing unusual, and you're just making this into a thing. But in a way, I would say perhaps we all do make it into a thing, but again, that's part of the exchange we have with consciousness around us, where there's a bit of a two-way thing, and we are making a narrative out of the symbols we see in the material world around us. But I don't think that invalidates it. So he started doing those things about swans, and then again he was looking into Andrew Collins' work, and then he came across the work that Andrew's done, and which I've talked about on a previous live stream. This was the book that I was talking about specifically, the Cygnus Key. He's also done the Cygnus Mystery. But developing these ideas, Andrew's research, and exploring for him what he sees as the importance of the Cygnus constellation, and as that was the constellation which was where the Tastepla sites like Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, where they were aligned to this, and the brightest of that constellation, Deneb, particularly was the North Star at that era in history when these sites were built. So, and that chimes into things which I've talked about before and will be going in the book around the importance of the North as a place identified with the other world. So and obviously Cygnus comes from the word for swan, and it ties in Andrew's mind with shamanism, going back to Debbie Cartwright's talk, another colleague of Andrew's. The shamanism around the Siberian area, where swans are particularly seen as being a spiritual bird or a manifestation, like a spirit guide for shamans and that sort of thing, and again a link to the other world. So he started to look in again to this Cygnus constellation. Igor's talked in the presentation about Cygnus X3, neutron star in that constellation, which sends out these hypergenetic particles that become trapped in crystals in the Earth's crust and then can be released by tectonic stress and can release some sort of form of plasma, geoplasma, as he described it. Now, there were again synchronicities that came up around the concept of around Cygnus. Actually, if I just maybe bear with me a moment, if I just move on a little bit further. This is his book, which I unfortunately had sold out by the time that well, it sold out very quickly after the talk, so I will get it ordered. You can get it on Amazon. So Language of Creation. So Igor Oakwood, I think it must be another name that Igor goes under, but now some of what is in the book he's also written about in an article which you can get on Ancient Origins website, and I do recommend that's quite a good one to look into, because that goes into in detail, which I've admitted before, it was very difficult number wise. In terms of mathematics and geometry is my weak point in terms of retaining those things. But I was very interested in the linguistic element of this. As he says, he talks about language of creation. So again, in the article that Igor's talked about in the Ancient Origins, he referred to Andrew Collins' research into these enormous cylinder-like shafts in this place called Dorrington Walls, which is not far from Stonehenge, which only been recently discovered. And there's just an enormous ring of them. And as I say, there's shafts in the ground. And Andrew Collins, again, on an article in Ancient Origins, and I think I've certainly heard him mention it on the talk. I think it might have been in the last symposium. Has talked about numbers and geometries involved with this Dorrington Walls. And I think in terms of sort of frequencies and resonances, I think it was following on around when he was talking about Stonehenge and about how that was like a temple but like a sonic temple, it's been described as by some people, in terms of it creates all these resonances and frequencies, and how important these are for changes in consciousness, but also in perhaps ways of going to another level of reality when we talk about these barriers between different dimensions being not solid and able to be traversed. Anyway, Andrew Collins talked about these numbers and geometries around Dorrington Walls and how about they recur also in many other megalithic constructions around the world. Now, what Igor's written here at the start of the article I found very interesting. So he's saying he's trying to prove that all megalith builders all over the world at one time used the same numerical matrix to construct and tune their enigmatic stone structures. It's my conviction that this matrix was Pascal's triangle, which is also known as Mount Meru, the primordial mound of creation and the tree of life. Now, this is Pascal's triangle. Again, it's talking about numbers. So, you know, I must confess again that you will need to look at Igor's own work to get a fuller understanding of it. But I mean, just in a very simplistic layman's terms, you can see that there's a one at the end of each line of these different dimensions, as you call it, these different levels as it sort of escalates to, you know, to the power of this 2, 3, 4, 5. So, and this is one of the synchronicities which echoed with me, and it's this idea of the significance of the number 11. And I know it's been spoken of, and infinite numbers of things on the internet about 1111. And I think we had or Liz had a thing today, a significant moment, and it happened at 1111. It's something that resonates with me, and I know it's different debates between people as to whether it's a good or bad signification and what it might mean. But there definitely seems to be something, and it resonates. And of course, then you've got things with where the number 11 has been encoded into things that have been done by the powers that shouldn't be, and 9/11 obviously springs up most particularly with that. And interesting in this article, and when he's referring to the Pascal's triangle, Igor saying it might finally reveal the deepest secret of the so-called 9/11 enigma. And, someone who's not mathematical at all like me thinks the 9/11 enigma is just a conspiracy theory thing about what happened with the Twin Towers, but this is apparently a mathematical conundrum. So Pascal's triangle shows how the geometric and mathematical resonance between a circle and its diameter is achieved in the 10th dimension. This knowledge has far more implications than we would first suspect. Now, this next bit resonates, and as I said, most of the talks within the symposium were around this idea of shaking boundaries between different kinds of realities and traversing these realities and things breaking down or shifting. And Igor saying we perceive material reality because there is a boundary between inner subjective consciousness and outer subjective matter. And this makes me think again of like you and Mockery's talk that I mentioned last night. However, we know that a boundary disappears is the ultimate interconnector in the universe. Resonance between living beings yields love, collectivity, procreation, oneness. Resonance dissolves any boundary between different objects. And this, for me, makes perfect sense. Makes me think of David Bohm's implicate and explicit order, but so many other philosophers, scientists, the ones that are prepared to look into different sides of things. But the idea that there is a oneness of everything, but then within everything, there is, there it is also made up of all these different individual elements. They are all interconnected and all at the same time part of this ginormous everything. But there is also at the same time this separate individual element, whatever it may be, that in the material world that's come out of this spiritual all that there is. And I guess so much of, in terms of like spiritual thought, philosophy is talking about how people can connect back and get back to this ground of all there is, in my terminology, this universal oneness that we all come from. And some would say, when the people talk about these barriers coming down, and it's a good thing and it's a natural thing and it's something that's meant to happen, and these barriers are coming down, so we would no longer have this separation, and we will be all at one, and there will be this spiritual connection again. We will be aware of it. It's perhaps always there, it's always part of us, but disconnected from it, or we've become closed off because artificial barriers have been created to keep us separate from the spiritual oneness. So Igor goes on that imagine that there exists a resonance which dissolves the boundary between the subjective observer and objective observed matter. This would mean that both the observer and the observed become one. Quantum physics shows us that matter, when it's not consciously perceived, behaves like a waveform that is everywhere at the same time, and thus not perceptible to the senses. This state in which all matter of the universe exists in an eternal here and now is called the 0 point field. So that's another name for it. I'd say the ground of all that is, but 0 point field sounds quite good. And it means that consciousness and matter are not independent of each other. This also means that there must be a specific resonance which dissolves the boundary between the inner and outer life experience. So there's, in great detail, and I do urge you to look into Igor's work, he's going through these Pascal's triangle and these different dimensions and different numbers within that, and he sees this as being important in terms of dissolving this boundary between the oneness of all, to connect again with the oneness of all things. Comprehending the link between thought consciousness and material reality and sharing this knowledge with the whole of humanity may help us to focus our attention towards more harmonic thoughts with which we can heal the planetary ecological system and uplift the average human collective consciousness level. Now, Igor goes on to say that he was communicated with by a star from this Cygnus constellation, which seems amazing, but then to some people maybe it doesn't seem so beyond the realms. So he's saying again, Andrew Collins comes into it. He keeps on repeating, doesn't he? He's not just me. Igor says, Pascal's triangle caught my attention in 2016 when Andrew Collins sent me some numbers received by means of strange light dips, which are emitted by Tabby's star. That's the name given to this star, a star in the Cygnus constellation. During the weeks that we exchanged information, it became clear that the numerical codes sent by Tabby's star pointed to the 9th and 10th dimension of Pascal's triangle. Something rang a bell because a few years before I had informed Andrew about a strange psychic message that I had received while dozing off on the sofa. This message was Xeniton 9, that's spelled Xeniton, Xeniton 9, Xeniton 10. Andrew thought this could have been a sign that some intelligence was trying to communicate with us in some strange hyperdimensional language. Two specific numbers sent by Tabby Star were 132 and 42. And again, I'm not going to, this is from Igor's article, so he will go into details of it. But again, you can see where he's highlighted his numbers there and done the mathematics there to how he arrives at that. You know, again, these are things that don't resonate with me in terms of I can't sort of see the numbers and say, oh, well, yeah, and make a connection in that way. But so, and there's connections with, again, which he goes into in detail about the number pi, which is obviously of great importance in terms of one of these numbers that also like the Fibonacci sequence, which he goes into and mentions as well. And where these are part of the sort of a sacred geometry, where these are mathematical numbers that are essential in terms of how material world is formed. Igor says here, we know that the number pi is the mathematical constant which creates resonance between the circumference and the radius of a circle. Again, say links with other talks. Jamie Arthur Pickup's talk, again talking about sacred geometry, circle, and this idea of the monad, circle with a dot in it, this sort of idea of which again symbolizes a universal oneness of creation. So back to that ground of all there is that was talked about earlier. So again, I won't go into the details of the number side of things because it's not my strength, and also, you know, I would lose people because I would be lost myself. So I'll just be reading out Igor's article without being able to fully explain it. So, but he's talking about the importance of 911 in terms of the diameter of a square and a circle. Basically, using sacred geometry, we can draw a circle with a diameter of 9 units and a square with a diagonal of 10 units. Now, where it resonates a bit more with me is when he talks about how the numbers and their symbols, they have connections with other symbols and with our language. So it's just, again, this idea of where I think I've been getting to, where I was trying to get to with my novel, which incidentally the original title of was The Individual, because in English the word individual, I know I've mentioned this before, but the word individual used to mean indivisible from a whole. So then you've got this idea of a oneness of everything. But then in the modern era, from sort of the Middle Ages or Renaissance time, early modern era, it came to mean what it means now. An individual is something that's separate from everything else. An individual is someone on their own, who's their own person, if you like, that's as separated from the mass of everyone else. So it's basically an opposite meaning. So to me, within that word, you've got those two elements of the universal oneness, but also the separation of each individual unit of matter, but in terms of a self, a person. But what I think is that language has devolved, and it's been used obviously for manipulation, and it's got this where it's just this postmodern idea that it doesn't mean anything. It's just a random kind of signs within a system, and the words, they don't actually have an intrinsic link to what they name and what they're describing, to the world that they are talking about. They're just an arbitrary symbols. We just know that the word arm means arm, just because we've learnt that, and it doesn't have any intrinsic link to an arm. But then when you look at the earliest forms of a lot of languages, this idea of ideography and magic writing, and you've got things like Egyptian hieroglyphs, but other forms of language as well, the cuneiform script, where evolving into a lot of the modern Western alphabets, particularly including English, where the actual letters, they were originally symbols for things in the material world, or in the sky, or for these geometric shapes that are basic shapes that define, or they're part of the building blocks of whatever all matter is created from. So it's maybe just trying to get back to this intrinsic connection of something that's really a real meaning to words, to language, the symbols that make them up. So if we look at this symbol, the symbol for pi, for this mathematic, for this collection of numbers, but which has great significance in terms of geometry of the material world, you can make some connections in terms of at number 11, two ones together, or obviously you've got a bar across the top, but sometimes when people do number 1, I think often on the continent as well, and they have a little pointy bit at the top. But also in terms of a physical thing, as Igor mentions, it's interesting that you look at the symbol there, and it looks like the entrance to a megalithic portal.
You're not sharing the picture.
Oh,
You big dickhead. Hover over it in the middle.
Yeah. Oh dear.
Dickhead.
I've been a dickhead, haven't I?
To stage.
Yeah, it's all right. Well, what? Okay, I will. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. I do apologize, people. That's my fault. I was getting ahead of myself, and you were probably thinking he's talking about all these images and he's not showing them to me. So I'm very sorry. Let me just quickly run through. So I'm very sorry. So okay, so this is Andrew's book, which I talked about before, the Cygnus key, talking about the importance of the Cygnus constellation and how it turns up to the sites in Göbekli Tepe and also Egypt in Andrew's research. This is Igor's book, which I'm very much going to buy. So Hallucinogens, Language of Creation. So again, this idea is talking about something intrinsic to language that's in the very heart of it. And this is Pascal's triangle. So once again, I'm very sorry that I wasn't sharing these pictures. Very remiss of me. That shows what happens when my good lady's not in the room. So this is Pascal's triangle, and you see that you've got the ones down at the end of each line in the very layman terms that I can understand. But these numbers as well that Igor said, or that were picked up from these signals that came from these blips from this Tabby star in the Cygnus constellation, and numbers that included 42 and 132. So say Igor, whose maths is infinitely better than mine, has said how these connect in with the Pascal's triangle, and also 132 divided by 42, you get this number pi. So again, this is taken, hopefully Igor won't mind, from his article on ancient origins, which I do recommend people to go to and also get the book. But ancient origins is a good way of, ancient origins article is a good way, and obviously lots of other fascinating things on there, some great articles by Andrew Collins, as amongst many others. So yeah, try get back to the program. So and there you go, that's the symbol pi. And as I was saying, in terms of just a physical resemblance of connection with two number ones, but also you can Igor mentioned how it looks like a megalithic construction, like a gateway, a portal that's on a megalithic site, and you've got where you have these I forget the exact, was it it's not trilithon, but yeah, when you've obviously got 3 megalithic stones and making an entranceway like you have to the long barrows, so many that I've banged on about on these talks before. So it resembles something like that as well. So again, where I've talked before about the physical constructions on these megalithic sites, and how they then, I think they've got an intrinsic connection to then what became symbols on engravings, on stone, on wood, and later on paper, etc., and became language. And also, as we've seen, as intrinsically connected to mathematics, which is like a code of everything. And although I don't fully understand it, I can certainly appreciate that mathematics, the quantum physicists, the computer world, mathematics is the language which is used to define our world. And it is a language in itself. But again, there's intrinsic connections with that. And Jamie, of a pickup, going into all the gematria ideas, which again is this idea where there's these mathematical codes of reality are again intrinsically connected with words, and each in things like the Jewish Kabbalah, they every letter has a number significance, so words have a numerical equivalent. So basically there's these mathematical codes are also intrinsic to linguistic codes. And Igor talks about it says a very important etymological key, so in terms of the components of language, is revealed through these discoveries. We know that the number 1 was once called El, since El signified first or light or life in Proto-Indo-European languages. You can see why I'm getting interested in this now, because it's all about this is what excites me when it gets out of the numbers side of things and talks about the language and the symbols. L was represented as a vertical line because it symbolized the first pillar on which the first sun rose. 12 hours later, the first sunset fell on a second pillar, forming the L evening. This might be the reason why we still call the number 11 L even today, which I found really fascinating. And that resonated with me in terms of this idea of 2 pillars. Again, these are things I've talked about before and I'm going to be writing about. Of course, so many ancient sites like Göbekli Tepe, you've got these twin pillars, like in the enclosure D at Göbekli Tepe, you've got these twin pillars and they're facing a portal stone. Again, this was aligned with Deneb, with the Cygnus constellation when it was built. Also, as you make a point, green tea, of course, as well, which Igor did mention on a later slide. He was looking at all these other important words where El is involved, and of course Elohim is one of those. And very interesting, all these discussions as well, which we've talked about with Mauro Bellino's work, and the idea of Elohim being an alien race. But just to move on from that now, although obviously that I think it all could link in, but this idea certainly of the Elohim, as being some sort of godlike or extraterrestrial or interdimensional figures. So that resonates again with what we're talking about in some way or another, just in terms of other dimensions and connections to a higher consciousness maybe, or a different level of understanding, or whether these are some to do with our origins. And then you've got things like elder, someone that is supposed to be older and wiser. So there are various important resonances where L is part of the linguistic coding and tradition that's been passed down. So this is, was particular things that excited me. As I say, there were synchronicities with numbers that I saw, but then as it relates also to linguistically, is a trilithon, the portal in a megalithic temple. So also what this symbol for pi, Igor was saying, it also looks to him like where you get an arc of electricity when it's between two poles, and you get the electricity that goes between the two. I think he's drawn here this symbol here with this idea of the electricity that's created between the two. This makes me think of that lightning bolt that you get through the tree of life that's in sort of Kabbalah and other traditions. So through the Sephirot and things like that, where you've got the lightning bolt marked as a way of like sometimes like a flash of inspiration that comes down from above. So this is very interesting as well when you think that plasma is a form of electricity. Did a talk about plasma as well. I think again, like quantum physics, plasma has almost unlimited scope in terms of bringing scientific ideas and connecting them with the spiritual, and it so opens up so many possibilities of things which us in the mad woo world have talked about, but also spiritual teachers and philosophers for millennia. And it gives, I think, a scientific basis to these things, which is what Robert Temple was talking in his book about plasma. And Igor had this first or important encounter with plasma balls, which in a way set him on the path that we're talking about now. So again, he's saying this pi symbol it reminds me of this of an arc of electricity as well. And then so he's sort of linking these different symbols. Pi, that's a symbol for hydrogen, which is like a capital H basically. That made me think again, if you go back to my big penis talk that was about the Origins conference, but also other things when I've talked about Göbekli Tepe, and there's these sort of H like symbols on these pillars at Göbekli Tepe. And Andrew Collins, I remember thinking that they might relate to this mountain in Okapi, or in Okapi National Park, because he was saying that this sort of shamanistic tradition had come down from this area in Siberia and to the Tastepla culture, and these mountains were of great importance there, and these amazing mountains with sort of like a bowl in between them, and it's like a natural observatory where he was saying that people used to observe the stars, and wondering whether these sort of pillar formations and towers that you get in sites that are followed almost ever since, there's some sort of echo resonance from looking at these mountains where the stars and like the lunar solar, where the bodies would move between, and that sort of thing. J.J. Ainsworth, Hugh Newman's partner and a great researcher into interested in the symbology of things rather than the megaliths themselves so much. And she was thinking that these might relate to twins, where so many different peoples around the world have these foundational myths, the origin myths that involve two brothers or twins, and them have, one of them having a fight, somehow one of them being killed, maybe dismembered, and this is all part of a like a creation myth of how the world came into existence. And she was talking about the obviously they're a bit different. The symbol on the pillars, like, resembles a capital H. It could be something where it's like two figures, maybe, holding hands or something like that, maybe. And I think both, there's a chance that both could resonate, and both could be have truth within them. That made me think of that with this hydrogen symbol. But again, linking, but with all these symbols, you've got the idea of two poles, two pillars, two towers, twin towers, and a connection between the two, a line across the top, or it might be a bridge around the middle. So again, very fascinating ideas. Which, yeah, mind blowing for me, and very exciting, I think, in terms of connecting up with stuff that I'm formulating in my head. So it's a great feeling, in a way, to think that there's other people doing different things, different research, but it's all connecting up. I'm just going to quickly whiz through to see where I'm at, and if so Igor has talked about in the article about measurements of the Great Pyramid of Giza and the importance of them within the framework of these numerical formulas, and also connected to other ancient sites around the world. But connections with the Schumann resonance, this sort of frequency of the Earth. So, and as I say, it's fascinating as well that he feels that he was getting communication by this star in the Cygnus constellation. And I think, again, remembering Robert Temple's book on plasma, and he was talking about, well, certainly suns obviously are giant balls of plasma, and I think there is a lot in it in terms of where people have talked about where people have said that we're going into a different age, where it's different levels of consciousness and people's ability to see more, and this could be connected in terms of us becoming in closer proximity to other stars, so that we are getting this extra plasma energy from other solar bodies that will be adding to our star. Whether that's also something to do with the fact that I think it's going to be mentioned actually. It's mentioned actually in Patricia Cori's talk, which I'm going to mention in a bit, where Liz has also talked about this, how the sun's changed color, and it's white, and it used to be yellow or golden. Liz wrote an absolutely blinding poem about that. One of these days I'm going to get her to read it to you. You can tell she's not here because I've actually revealed that. But again, that could be maybe something to do with changes in plasma, where we are the solar system, because obviously we revolve around the sun, but then the sun with everything, the solar system is all revolving around, the galaxy. So everything is in constant movement, just in terms of that material movement, apart from the quantum flow of everything. But this, was it Heraclitus, everything's in a state of flux. Everything is in perpetual movement. So I think plasma is key to many things there. Now, let me just move on a little bit. So, but as I say, there is so much more that I can't go into, both in terms of time, but also in terms of not having the brain power, mathematical ability to go through it. But I do recommend you check out Igor's work. And so the Ancient Origins article is a very good stepping point. But yeah, go the whole hog. Get the book. I've also ordered, because at the conference you can do a sort of order form. It's nice and old school in terms of you can order a DVD of the talks for about a tenner, I think it is, to be posted to you. They sort of come out within a few weeks of the conference. Eventually, conference talks go on there. So if you do look for Glastonbury Symposium on YouTube, usually after a few months, so sort of the following year, a lot of the talks will go up on YouTube, and there's some great ones that I've talked about in the past from last year's conferences and previous. There's an incredible wealth of amazing talks that you can see on the Glastonbury Symposium YouTube channel. So I do recommend people going and having a look at those. So a lot of these will eventually find their way on there, but you can get a DVD sort of just to have it earlier. But yeah, in terms of the Giza pyramids, Igor saying that he thinks they're a power plant for plasma production, and it certainly chimes with me again. I know other people have come up with this idea. It's not a new one, but that it's some kind of power plant. And Igor said involving hydrolysis of water, and I talked about before, the importance of water, whether it's with so many Neolithic sites, megalithic sites, they tend to be near a water source, and I think that's very important. Why there's a lot around this area in Wiltshire, and talked before. Andy Thomas in a previous talk at the symposium spoke about why this area is one where is one of the highest concentrations of crop circles, and it does well. He sort of he showed a map of like the place where the highest concentration of crop circles over the last however many years, and around this area in Wiltshire was one of the most. Sussex has got a lot, and then superimposed a map showing where aquifers are, like the biggest aquifers, underground water sources, and it's almost exactly the same area. So there does seem to be a connection in whatever way with water, underground water in these cases, and that's some sort of important conductor for energy in some way. Thanks, Green Tea. In terms of interviewing, yeah, I like I say, I'm trying to work on it. I've already reached out to Igor, and Liz has also reached out to Juliet Bryant, who I mentioned yesterday. So we are hoping that we will get some interviews going on in the near future. So there was interesting actually. Another thing when you were talking about the different words beginning with L, one is Elizabeth, and so there's another connection with me personally. But I can't quite remember what. I think in Egyptian hieroglyphics, the again, when I'm talking about the origins of language having a physical connection with something in the material world, I think it was for L, the letter L was basically like a hieroglyph of an arm, whichever, can't get it around here the right way, sort of that way, and that's what it looks like. It's like a drawing of an arm. And again, Igor was wondering if that's why we have the word elbow for the join in the arm. Again, this idea, that language isn't just, or certainly in its original form, it's not just arbitrary signs that have no intrinsic connection to the material world, the things that they name. They very much do, or they certainly did. And maybe that's part of what we need to do to get back to this connection of all there is. It's realizing these connections deep within language. So I think I'll probably move on now from Igor's work. I'll probably find another slide that I haven't gone into. Yeah, I think I've done it. So yeah, so the next talk that I'm going to speak about is Nick and Sarah Kyle. Now, I've got to get my notebook. Bear with me one moment. Yeah, right. Oh, bear with me. As I say, I sort of multimedia'd. So some of my notes I transferred onto computer, onto my laptop, and then others I'm just sort of going from my notebook. But Nick and Sarah Kyle, I don't know if they might, like I say, a large number of talks from the symposiums get put up onto their YouTube channel the year following. So I think it may have only been Nick on his own, but yeah, certainly spoke at a previous symposium. May have been sort of something like about 3 years ago, and I was very impressed with the talk he did then. So they came back for this year. So, but I mean, you might, if you're interested from anything that I'm talking about, perhaps you can find it on there or their work otherwise. So they're involved. They're paranormal investigators, I suppose you could call them, although not quite in the same manner as these people that go around on various sort of TV channels and internet sites, going into scary buildings and with all these photography and sort of infrared and that sort of thing. But they've been involved with the Scottish Society for Psychical Research, which was formed in 1987. And a description, I'm not sure if it's theirs, I think they took it from somewhere else, a psychic fire brigade. And well, I suppose in a different way to Jason Bray, that deliverance minister, the Anglican priest that I mentioned in the talk last night, they often get called, although they're not involved in a religious group, but they often get called by people who are having paranormal experiences, some sort of haunting, and they want them to investigate to get rid of it, to try and move on the paranormal experience. So they said that apparently there's a statistic, I think someone's done one of these surveys, that 70% of people in the UK have had some sort of paranormal experience. And that seems to make sense to me. Maybe like Andy Thomas has said, which I mentioned before, that a lot of people were not prepared to necessarily sometimes own up to paranormal experiences. You know, they don't want to tell people that they've had something because they think they'll just be people who think that they're mad or stupid or something like that. So maybe not all of them, maybe the figure's even higher than that. That wouldn't surprise me, especially where you draw the line as to what is a paranormal experience. You know, things like deja vu. I mean, I've mentioned before, I've had these sort of shadow people things, sightings of, only lasting a brief moment of time. And even for people that are open to these ideas like myself, in a way, some of these things I've just sort of put to the back of my head and not really thought about it. And sometimes you go back and think about these things. We did a Paranormal Peep show appearance, and you know, talking about paranormal experiences we've had, and you know, it's sometimes you sort of think, blimey, yeah, that happened. I haven't really thought about that for years, but blimey, what was all that about? That was incredible. So much of paranormal experience is beyond the scope of current scientific understanding. Just a quote that I've written down that Nick, I'm not sure if you read it from someone else, but beyond the scope of current scientific understanding, but may prove beneficial. He said he regards himself as a skeptic, but he sees these things. They both see paranormal activity, paranormal entities, for want of a better word. In a similar way to Jason Bray, he referred to a few previous cases that they had. You know, as he mentioned that they'd had a talk before when they'd gone into detail about some cases and things like that. So he didn't want to go over the same ground again. Similarity again with the Anglican minister in talking about what might bring on a spiritual or an encounter with a spirit. He said the 4 trends: trauma experienced by someone or in a place can bring up a spirit, an encounter with something paranormal. Adolescence, again, that teenagers was something mentioned by Jason Bray as being, with poltergeist activity particularly, as being particularly common. And he also mentioned renovations, so that when a house is being changed, it's being, the old style of the house is being sort of ripped out and new things put in, and that often causes there to be some sort of ghostly encounter. And so yeah, this was mentioned also by Jason Bray, the minister. And I mentioned in the talk last night, I was thinking in a way how whole society, because of this sort of reset that they're trying to do, so that's like a renovation for our society. You know, old things, old ways of behaving, old beliefs are being thrown out, or they are, you know, the powers that shouldn't be are telling us to throw them out, or they're doing all they can to make us think that they never existed, or they're wrong, and things we believed before aren't true. So it's that sort of idea. Everything's been shaken up. So again, this idea that reality is shifting or barriers are breaking down. And just on that material level of things changing in the world, it's not really a surprise maybe that more people are having these experiences. Or maybe as well, Green Tea says almost everyone has had a paranormal experience. We have just been taught to brush them off. And I think that's true. And maybe in some respects, some people at least are feeling more that they can talk about the experiences they had. So maybe there's an element there. Also, Nick and Sarah was saying sometimes a spirit will appear because you ask for it. So, and that sort of resonates again with what some other speakers were saying. You know, Nick Hayes, as I say, I didn't fully go into his talk because you can see his great talk that he did very kindly for us and on our channel here. But, you know, he's talked to us as well personally about how, you know, often it's a case of asking entities to appear, you know, that you want to see something in the sky, or, you know, in Nick's case, because he was trying to take images of it. So calling for it to, you know, to appear. But, you know, that can have a downside. You know, sometimes I think when you invite things in, as they say, then you're opening a bit of a portal. Is an often overused word, maybe, but you open the channels in, then maybe for a lot of people they can't control then what's coming through, and then get to see things when they're not asking for it. He mentioned a few sort of people from the past or notable paranormal experiences or experiencers. This guy called Albert Best, he was the adopted uncle of George Best, the famous footballer, for those who are aware of that, of him. But he was supposed to be one of the top mediums. So obviously 20th century, I think he's, shall we say, passed on to the other side now. But he was apparently a remarkable guy. He, you know, very down to earth, shall we say. He was so highly regarded that many famous people, film stars, pop stars, royalty, would go to see him. But he didn't used to charge money. He was just wanting to heal people, and he, you know, had some remarkable results. And obviously people that, certainly people that had money and power also knew that he was someone that could get results, shall we say. But Nick related a story when he met Albert Best, and he was saying that this, I think a woman had got in touch with him. I might have got things slightly, but I think it was her son had cancer, was a child, I believe. You know, and the doctors have said it's incurable, nothing could be done. And she brought the boy to Albert Best, and Nick Cole said he was there as well, and he said it was Albert Guest started. It's almost like he sort of channeled this German doctor, came through him, and Nick said he saw Albert stroked the forehead of the boy, and Nick said that he saw these dark globules sort of coming from the face of the boy into this basin. And then sort of after this, sort of Albert Guest sort of came back into the room, if you like, and was like, oh, what just happened? He had no conscious memory of it. He'd say this sort of, I guess, spirit guide of a German doctor had come through him. But then apparently 2 or 3 weeks later, the oncologist or whatever told the mother of this boy, oh, we're really sorry, we must have got our diagnosis wrong, because, you know, we've tested your boy again and there is no cancer. It's gone. But yeah, Nick was saying the first diagnosis wasn't wrong. Basically, you know, this guy healed it, or he was a channel for spirits that that were able to do that. I guess again, this is just an example again of the way reality can be shifted, and so these things we were sort of talking about when the previous speaker. So these things where you can connect with a different level of reality. It's also a way of. It can be a way of healing as well, and I think actually, I think Igor mentioned that word in his article as well. So it's. And I think these are one and the same thing when people talk about quantum, when people talk about spirit. I referred, Mark Vernon talking about William Blake. He said imagination. For him, imagination was. It meant the same thing as the spiritual to him. That was. So all of these things, and many people just use the word love. All of these are maybe just different aspects of the same thing. So yeah, I mean, Nick and Sarah did talk about. I mean, most of the occasions when they've encountered spirits, it's all been very benevolent, and they just talk to them, and they're not threatening at all. I think just talked about one guy that was sort of haunting one place, and he was just like, he was, Nick was talking to the spirit, and was like, well, just bugger off basically, and stop annoying these people. And the spirit was like, oh well, I just something to do. I'm just getting my fun, just sort of frightening these people. And in one case, Nick actually said that his wife Sarah told him off for it, actually, because he actually said to the ghost, oh well, you'll have much better fun in my house rather than here. And then he actually, the ghost basically physically walked out the door and got in their car and went with them to their own house. And it then apparently took a long time to get rid of him from their house. So his wife wasn't very pleased with that. But he did talk about one very frightening experience he had in the west of Scotland. He said that there's maybe some energies around the west of Scotland that are particularly powerful. I know, obviously, I've talked about Orkney in terms of megalithic sites, but certainly on the Scottish mainland, there's a huge amount of incredibly powerful megalithic sites, very notable sites. To say that's connected with this next story, but yeah, apparently they were in some building, and Sarah, his wife, and I think there was a third person there as well, they could see some large black mass which followed which was following Nick, and they basically said to him, you've got to get out of this house now, you've got to get out, this is following you. And he was unaware of it himself, but he got out, and then he immediately was violently sick. So there was something, there was definitely something affecting him. And it was, I guess, again, these things can take very different forms, because a lot of the stories they talked about, like sort of ghosts of maybe people that lived in a place before, they're human forms. They are humans to all intents and purposes, whether it's just like an energy of someone that you'd lived in that place before. But this was something very much different. They described it as like a large black mass. So yeah, some fascinating stories. And like I say, the previous talk they did as well, they were very convincing to me. They talked then and talked a bit again today. They were involved with the Scole group. I know a friend Ben. Don't say the C word. Probably too late. And yeah, the Scole group is an amazing group, which people will probably be aware of, but if not, then look it up on the internet. But it was around from 92 to 98, and I think it was basically just in the basement of a house. Forget whereabouts in Scotland, but these people over these several years were having these amazing psychic sessions, I suppose, and were visited by all sorts of incredible entities, orbs. He said that they actually saw a spacecraft appear in a room, like looking like a smaller scale, but of what you would, I suppose, stereotypical UFO craft. But orbs touching people. Apparently, Nick said he saw his wife Sarah lifted up. Sarah felt one of these balls sort of go inside her. I definitely recommend. We when our friend Ben Hapamwa Rodo came to visit us once, we were looking at a documentary on YouTube about the Scole group and some really incredible stuff. And Nick was saying that NASA scientists came to the sessions because they were so blown away. And obviously, as we know, lots of these authorities around the world, whether it be military or secret intelligence services or whatever, like I mentioned on Ewan Rockley's talking about these US Army remote viewing programs, these supposedly very real world materialistic government bodies are very much aware that there is more to the world than material reality, even though that's not what the general supposed consensus of science is, which goes in the paradigm which is spoken of, in the media and everything else. But really, the powerful, whether it's royalty talking to a medium like Albert Guest, but all these other programs in terms of trying to harness people's psychic ability and use it as a weapon. These people are very much aware of these things. I've written down this quote, which again I presume must have come from something Nick and Sarah said, but co-creation may be a cause for paranormal experiences. Beliefs can create beliefs can create happiness or harm. And I wonder if I can't quite remember what the context of him saying that was, but for me it was thinking of where I spoke before, different speakers talking about where you make or people make their own they make their own reality in terms of it's their consciousness, their perception on the world that makes things happen. So maybe in terms of different people's consciousness, each making a different version of reality to some degree or another, and when those rub against each other, and you've got one person's perception of reality that coming up against someone else's, you get sort of like it's like almost like a split universe thing, but maybe when there's a crossover point, and that's where you get something seen in like a ghostly form. Another quote that Nick and Sarah mentioned was Einstein's "everything is energy." So again, a lot of these scientific views, even though supposedly more materialists say, "Oh, science disproves this and that." Science, you trust the science, but they're using that as terms to sort of say that people like us are being ridiculous for what we are interested in and what we consider to be possible. But in actual fact, modern science is perfectly, or it's certainly not in opposition to so many of the things that we look at, and in many cases it chimes perfectly with it. So there's profound implications of the paranormal, and I suppose the main lesson that is that, you know, we must continue to learn from it, but it can be a source of healing, but it's just again showing that the barriers between different versions of reality, dimensions, are very thin and can be crossed over very easily. So to the last speaker on this odyssey, the keynote speaker, the symposium, they have basically the format they have the 3 days of the conference. You can get individual lecture tickets when seats are available. You can obviously pay for the whole full 3 days, and you can also buy individual day tickets for each of the days. But then there's always a sort of standalone talk, last thing, on the evening of the Sunday, so to finish off the conference. But that's always something, again, which is set apart from the rest of the conference, and you buy an extra ticket for it and all that sort of thing. So they try and save it for a big name, shall we say. So this year it was Patricia Cori. Now, I've got to be honest in my ignorance. Patricia wasn't someone that I was aware of before, but she's spoken before at the symposium, and I know friends of mine saw her, and she made a big influence on them then. And she's someone that's been a notable presence for a long time. She's, I suppose you can call her an experiencer, psychic. She's a member of the Sirian High Council. These are kind of things that make me always sort of a little bit wary. Funny enough, she said as part of her talk that she doesn't like people talking about Federation speak, like part of a galactic federation. So the Sirian High Council, there is a website that people can look into these things more, which maybe I will as well. But she's someone that has psychic connections, and whether that's with the paranormal. She talked about very great, entertaining talk, and she's a very funny lady, but also powerful and strong. But yeah, causing lots of laughter. But she was talking about she won't go into the George and Pilgrim anymore, which is you know, our favourite pub. This the amazing pub stroke hotel in Glastonbury on the High Street, which is, you know, one of the oldest inns in the country. And the story goes, although it's been you know, claimed that it's not actually true, but that Henry VIII stayed there when, you know, the dissolution of monasteries, and they did terrible things to the Glastonbury Abbey, and it was destroyed and people killed. But it's supposed to be a very haunted place. I mean, we've stayed there several times. I haven't actually experienced anything there myself, but she said she sort of walked in there and saw like two pirate figures, you know, sort of dressed in the garb, you know, with a tanker sitting in there's these sort of big old chairs sort of at the end of the hallway through the pub. And she said, oh, you know, she walked in there and saw them there, you know, just having a laugh together. And she at first thought, oh, you know, well, it's Glastonbury, there's, you know, these people just having a laugh and dressed up and all the rest, having a good time. And then she sort of like clocked onto them, as it were, and they clocked on that she could see them, and then they like disappeared. So she was like, after that, oh, I'm not going to go in there again. So I suppose if you're someone that is highly intuitive and sees spirits anyway on a regular basis, going somewhere like the Georgian Pilgrim would be a bit of an overload. So, but yeah, she's also got contact with people, entities from other worlds. She's very much in this world in terms of what's happening with the powers that shouldn't be, and what they've been doing to the world, what they've been doing to us. This is her book, Hacking the God Code, which she's her most recent book. Obviously, she's done a number. The Conspiracy to Steal the Human Soul. Now, she said that her normal publisher wouldn't publish it, and that's because it's referring to the thing that I can't mention on YouTube, but that the jibber jabber, as some people have coded it. But yeah, this idea that is all part of a system to hack into, to rewrite the DNA, and it's all part of separating us. Again, this idea of, continuing this separation of us humans from the source, from the ground of all there is, to use my term. So that is something that she's very engaged with. She said right at the start of the talk, right, everyone turn off your mobile phones. She was saying how much she hates mobile phones, and how, and again, these are the synchronicities. Liz had this experience just recently, and she was talking to our friends just sort of like the night before about the fact that she had an experience, and she said actually it wasn't before she got a new phone. She didn't have a phone, but she was around her laptop. But a couple of occasions where I think she might have talked about it on a thing on here on the YouTube, I can't remember, but she's actually thought about something, didn't say it because it's become common knowledge now that phones are listening to you, and probably computers, everything is that they are always listening to us. So everyone's had the regular experience. You maybe talk about something in conversation, like, maybe I need to get a new stepladder, and then you suddenly start getting adverts coming up on your internet feed or social media or whatever for, oh look, stepladders are now 5% cheaper in whatever shop, that sort of thing. That, I mean, there was a Press for Truth video that I think Liz actually shared on our channel, and saying that she's had these experiences. Press for Truth, which is a good channel, and the guy on there was saying, he was talking about, he sort of reposted a video that he'd done years ago, saying about phones are listening to you, and he was saying that people were saying he's mad and that's ridiculous and you're a mad conspiracy theorist. And now it's commonly accepted, and it's even admitted by various sources. Oh, these things are monitored. Everything's being monitored. But he was saying it's another level now, and he was saying people are going to maybe say I'm mad again, like they did the last time. But in a few years, or maybe sooner than that, people say, "Oh no, you were right." But he was saying as well that actually these phones and whatever is reading your thoughts now. And again, he was citing things where there's been articles that even, and we know what they put out officially is usually only a tiny % of what they've already done or are doing. But there are things about research into brain waves being technology picking up on brain waves, and then taking those brain waves and converting them into deciphering them. So yeah, Liz had already, previous to her watching that, she had already had these experiences of thinking about something, oh yeah, I wonder about something, but not saying it to anyone, not saying it out loud where it could be recorded, not typing anything in a search or anywhere on the internet, which obviously then we know that obviously gets picked up by algorithms. Literally just having a thought about something. Oh, I need to look up that thing that I look, and then it pops up in a internet feed. And Patricia Cori was talking about this, about that they're reading your thoughts, and that's the next stage. And yeah, I've got my phone in my pocket. Oh damn! No, that's ruined it, isn't it? But yeah, I didn't have a phone for a while, but I've got one again now, and yeah, I think she's right. We do need to try and minimize our phone use. She was saying she has it in sort of, she hardly ever uses a phone, but she sort of has one, and she actually has it in a sort of one of these cases to stop frequencies getting through, and actually buries it in a plant pot when she's at home, so people can't be annoyed at her because they can't get through to her on the mobile phone. But she's saying it's something that needs to be avoided. And the other big thing that she said that she's heard or seen people talking about is the next stage as well, that from technology that they're going to be able to produce or project images. I don't know if it's like a sort of hologram. Things are going to be able projected from computers, phones into the world. And again, I can't see how that, knowing what they can do, what we already know they can do, holographic technology, that wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. If so, again, that we've got this hi whispering. We've got again this thing Andy Thomas was talking about when he was talking about the portents and people seeing things in the sky, the cosmos, in the world, and then seeming to be signs of things, whether it's an apocalypse or something. But again, it's such muddied waters in that I think there is changes in consciousness, whether it's things to do with this, changing position in the solar system, different levels of plasma, all these things I think are real, thinning layers. But then you've also got this level where, if you like, on the physical material world, you've got people messing about with our reality through fakery, because it's with all the technology now, not just making deep fakes in terms of videos and images of people that you can't tell if it's it's the real person or not. It's just a digital representation of them. But absolutely, they can project holograms into the sky. They can do all these things, and again, it's almost impossible to tell if these are fakes or not. So you've got these messing up of reality, some of which I think is an actual loosening of the barriers between dimensions, but also you've got these things where there's fakery, different levels of fakery, which is messing with our minds as well. But one technology which Patricia was talking about having a very real effect in terms of these breaking down the barriers is CERN. And very much talking about this idea that CERN is opening portals, it's communicating with other dimensions, tearing holes in dimensions. She quoted Dr. Astrid Stuckelberger. I don't know if anyone's else has seen. I hadn't heard of her, but I looked at something just tonight. She's been on a number of YouTube channels. So she's a medical doctor, from what I picked up. She was saying she worked with the World Health Authority, or the WHO rather, but she was involved with doing some research connected to CERN, and she said she's spoken to physicists working at CERN, and they told her that things they were doing there were about opening other dimensions, and she said that she was told that entities had come through from these other dimensions through these portals that have been opened up through CERN. And she related one story that this Stuckelberger had talked about, where she was told that there'd been a scarf in a room where this sort of portal was, and then the scarf disappeared, so it was like it had been taken to this other dimension. I've only just listened to a little bit of that talk, or a talk by this Astrid lady, but I do think that so much has happened that is because of CERN and other particle accelerators. Do think that they are doing things to weaken the boundaries. I mean, I think, as Patricia said, maybe it's doing us a favor in some ways. I mean, it's disruptive, but perhaps it's all part of this loosening of barriers, and maybe that ultimately is going to be something that is going to be a good thing, because it's all about us getting to this different level of consciousness when we don't have these divisions between us and this great oneness. And she did say at one point, bring it on if there's going to be all this crazy crashing of reality. Let it blow. Maybe we just everything needs to just to move on to this other level. I don't think she meant it in terms of things blowing up, in terms of bombs, because you get that with a lot of the apocalyptic talk, when it's like they want to create an apocalypse by blowing things up to fulfill some prophecy to go into this other reality. But that's not what she's talking about. But she's, I think, saying, okay, well, if this current paradigm is going to get destroyed, well, then maybe that's going to allow us to go to the next level. But she was saying about there's these constant glitches in our reality, or perception of reality. She talked also about number of solar flares and this gap in the sun. I did have a little quick look up on the internet. So again, it's like a mainstream science thing where they talk about a coronal keyhole. I may have got the wrong word, but yeah, it's something that's been in the general science news. I sort of missed it, but this sort of a black hole, not a black hole, but within the sun. She said that there'd been footage of, I think, craft almost plugging into these holes. I hadn't seen that myself. But yeah, I think she was warning about, she said she talked about Michael Sulla, who I know is quite a prominent person, that, had this discussion about, whether if there'd be that sort of fake alien invasion, a benevolent alien invasion, with a sort of we're gonna help you, but you've got to sort of do certain things and toe the line before we'll give these things to you, and that possibility. So yeah, let me just see if there's anything that I've missed. I mean, I will have missed things, but she was a great speaker. She was really powerful. She was saying that, I mean, interesting, you know, she was talking about the fact that there's these 12 strands of DNA, and modern molecular science talks about junk DNA. So we've only got two strands that actually are, you know, conveying the hereditary characteristics. But I think other people have said as well that, you know, maybe, you know, these other strands aren't junk, and it's, you know, there's all this lost, incredible stuff within us that's just been blocked off from us. That we've only got these two strands, but there's all these other strands that maybe we used to have access to. So that's an interesting other side to the, you know, this concept of, you know, maybe Elohim as a sort of dominant space race that came down years ago, this sort of concept, and the Homo erectus, you know, they were genetically modified so to make them sort of a bit more intelligent to be able to carry out the tasks that they needed in mining gold or whatever it's been said to be. So they sort of upgraded us.
Hello.
But hello Liz. Upgraded us, but only in to a can you turn the sound off?
Oh yeah, I forgot. I was listening to you on the phone. Tell them.
And then Liz will say, "Oh, why is there feedback on the thing?"
I was
Because you were listening to it in the room.
Green Tea's asked you a question. Stop rambling on.
She's asked me a question. Stop rambling on. Yeah, I can stop rambling on. Which speaker made the biggest impression on you, and why? I guess Igor. You know, I've just been banging on about him a lot because of resonances with things that I've been my own research. You know, around language, just things like the number 11, and obviously the fact that he had all this correspondence with Andrew Collins, and you know, I also pleasure of meeting Andrew Collins and been influenced by his research, so there was connections there.
Juliet was fun and full of energy.
Just really great speakers. But in terms of my personal research, Igor's was particularly, but yeah, Patricia was absolutely great. She's inspiring. She's a really strong lady.
We had a drink with her afterwards.
We had a drink with her afterwards, which was a great pleasure. So really good fun, and I think insightful, and a sort of a she's like a no shit lady, you know, don't take any nonsense.
I could relate to her.
Yeah, she's down to earth lady. Like, I don't know if is she from New York? I don't know, but she's got that sort of like attitude, but really good fun as well. But like, but yeah, again, it's this idea, you know, if someone met her without knowing that she's into all the woo stuff, she would just come across as like a strong, sassy lady. And then it's, oh, you know, got all these connections with other dimensions and other realities. And like, again, it doesn't have to be the sort of stereotypical new agey type of a person, you know. And maybe that's again part of the connection with the fact that everything's breaking down, so it's all becoming just everyday people are getting these downloads, if you want to call it, and getting these experiences, whether it's just a small paranormal experience or a larger one, and that's then sending them off into other areas of thinking that the world is not as it seems.
So there were some speakers that you haven't mentioned, because you did have to help me with the stall. So who was there? Gary Hasseltine you didn't mention because you had to help me with the stall. Gary's the one that did a lot of work with Capel Green.
Yeah.
You don't have to go into too much detail.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I can't go into any detail because I didn't see it, but I mean, yeah, I did mention at the start of tonight. So Gary Hasseltine, I didn't see, and Jason Porterhouse, and there was so I think that was mainly. Then there was is it Danny Thompson, the lady's name? Let me just, as I say, Nick Hayes didn't go through his talk, but obviously mentioned him and have a listen to him on our own channel. Simon Keeley, I apologise I didn't get to see your talk. Gary Hasseltine, Roland Beljon, who also does the Crop Circle tour, which I didn't do this year, but I did last year. So I heard him talk about crop circles a lot on the tour. Very engaging guy and very knowledgeable about crop circles. And Danny Henderson, it was, I believe, another American lady, an alien and paranormal experiencer. Again, I heard good things about her talk. So, you know, I think all of the talks were of the same great standard as we're used to in the symposium. So it was an absolutely incredible experience. I think I finished, unless Liz wants to add anything. But yeah, great to meet people, friends from before, and new people, and get some great new insights from some amazing speakers. So there's conversations at the pub. That's always the best thing about it, isn't it? Green tea, the conferences. It's always great to hang out and share stuff with friends, share great conversation, and yeah, it's good to get some good contacts. But yeah, one day, green tea, you'll have to come over here, and we'll join us for a beer in the Georgian Pilgrim. What Green Tea's asking you? What was your favourite part? Well, Liz was.
I was upstairs the whole time.
Well, but you did see Patricia Cori's talk, didn't you? And you enjoyed that. But yeah, the beer in the pub afterwards was even better.
That I was upstairs on the stool the whole time. She can't hear me.
Yeah, as mentioned, Liz was up doing her stall, so she didn't actually get to see the talks, but because Patricia Cori's was this sort of extra one in the evening, so after the rest of the conference had finished, the stall was packed away, so Liz was there for that, and the beer afterwards. But yeah, thank you both. Thank you, Green Tea. Thank you, Isbaroon, and thank you for anyone else that's been watching and listening over the two talks. And love to you all, and we'll speak again very soon. Enjoy the rest of your week.